Hey, what is up, Polar fam? This is Shib Bear here, joined by the one, the only Yulian, to go over our weekly Polar Community AMA with each and every one of you. Of course, answer any questions that you guys might have on your mind. To simply request to speak here, and I'll answer you live, or post away in the AMA Questions Weekly channel, and we will answer your questions live on air as well. This is, again, our outlet to reach out to you guys directly and let you know what's been going on with Polar, what is to come, what's happening now, and of course, like I just mentioned, to answer any questions that you guys might have along the way. So first and foremost, I usually take this first little bit of time to go over some of the updates, some of the things that we're working on, and different developments within the space, right? So lots of big things happening here. We just got another draft of the white paper yesterday, so it's pretty close. There's a few different things that need to be updated from there, a little bit from a grammatical standpoint, and then also just adding in some images and stuff, but it's pretty close. It's just about there. Ideally, we'll get that live sooner rather than later. Again, we've talked about maybe giving a date today. I don't know how comfortable I feel about that right now, to be perfectly honest, until I see it that it's fully done. And that's just, just so not everyone jumps in and says, hey, you said this date, because quite frankly, I don't know, right? So I'd rather have that coming along, but it is a pretty in-depth document, right? So it goes into, right now, what goes into a significant portion of what the long-term vision of Polar actually is and how that's going to be incorporated with the community here that we've built up over the last almost year at this point, right? So a lot of that big stuff coming on. What I did suggest for it is to say, hey, let's hammer down a whole section that really is focusing on the current, what is happening here and now, what happens to your nodes, what are they doing, all those kind of things there, because that is what a lot of people here are going to be very interested in the short term, even though in the long term, the gamification side will likely be taking the forefront because that's a real business model, right? So if you follow a node methodology for too long, it's obviously going to run into some inflationary issues that we've kind of already seen, and that most other node protocols out there in the space have already seen and dealt with, of course, right? But the next big news that I want to say is, one, we've gotten a lot of updates from Polaris, which is pretty cool. The artwork of it's coming along very well. But we also have some pretty good updates on the Polar Bear Battle Royale game. That is very, very close. It's already been in a testnet kind of sector here. If any of you guys are involved in the testnet, of course, you've seen already what that is, doing for the, not just for our own progress, but also what the game will be in the future. And ultimately, we are going to have a good public tournament here, ideally within the next few weeks, right? So we do have kind of a timeline in mind. Obviously, like I just mentioned earlier, I'm a little bit hesitant to try to give timelines because delays can happen. So I'd rather get it all done, ready to go. Then we could say, hey, now we're going to announce it to go live, right? So there will be some good progress on the Polar Bear Battle Royale side here coming up. And it will be a live tournament so that people can actually participate in it. It can, it's like a live P4P sort of Battle Royale style game, right? So all that'll be coming here in the very, very near future. And as we start developing other things, there's also a couple other games that are going to be announced within the white paper as well that you guys will be able to read about. They have different timelines to be associated with each and every one of them, of course, but it is pretty apparent that gamification is going to be a pretty substantial part of the long-term vision of Polar. Once you guys get this white paper in front of you and read through it, it is a little bit long, so I kind of suggested some ways to make it more digestible for the average investor. Just things that I've personally utilized or seen utilized that generally work as far as like bullet points go. But worst case, we can put down bullet points together and go over them one by one in AMA, which will give me a lot of material, which will be kind of nice anyway, right? So a lot of good information to come up from that. Right now, it's focused on the big long-term vision. Let's get some shorter-term, very, very, ground level goals so that the majority of the community who honestly solely cares about that can actually see what's happening for that actual migration to BSC. So that's kind of the progress there. Is right now the white paper is pretty, I guess, in depth, and I'm trying to figure out a way to give it a little bit less of a, how do I want to word this? A little bit more of a focused point by point aspect for those who are within the community in reference to specifically the node protocol here, right? Because that's what a lot of people do care about. So that's kind of the latest that we have here. I know we are in November, so I'm going to get the questions. You guys said early to mid-October. You said at the latest late October, and now it's November, right? So totally get it. Totally valid concerns. So quite frankly, I'm just done putting dates on it, done putting timelines. Once these things are done and ready to go, we will start making those announcements accordingly because it's not fair to you guys to try to say, hey, it's going to be done relatively at this time, and then the developers get COVID or something, and now they're sick, which is what did happen in early October, right? So it puts you guys in a bad position as far as your reflection on us as a team, and it also puts the team in a bad position when you cannot meet the things that you're putting out there into the space, right? So to avoid that, once we get these things ready to go and they are completed and reviewed and say, hey, these are ready to go, that's going to be the time to start announcing dates, because the only thing we have to wait for then is to push them live. And that's what needs to be happening anyway. So Enor is working very, very hard to try to get these developers to accomplish these tasks each and every day, because that's just the nature of the game. If any of you guys have been heavily involved in DeFi for any substantial period of time, getting devs on the same page is a little bit tricky sometimes, but nevertheless, it will all come together in due time, of course. So lots of big things happening there. And again, of course, if you guys have any questions during this AMA, simply request to speak live or post away in the AMA questions weekly channel. I don't have a ton to go over because we don't have these things live just yet. So normally we do have questions that do pile in. So if you guys do have those questions, simply let us know. As of this second, we don't have any questions here in the AMA questions channel, but I will certainly go through all of them. And while I filibuster, I can go into a little bit of the kind of economic differences, right? So I've always talked about, obviously my education background is within economics, and that's something that's kind of important to the crypto space in general. So what happened today with this FOMC meeting and then the subsequent press conference, right? So the actual meeting itself, the bullet points put out after it, not super bad, right? Pretty stable. However, the press conference is likely going to lead to a little bit of a downward, at least early to mid-November. And why do I say that? Because the Federal Reserve said that we are not ready to pivot to a dovish monetary policy. And all that means is very likely rates are going to continue to be risen at the same exact rate, if not at a higher rate than they currently are, in order to avoid something like a recession, which I'd argue by definition we are already in a recession. But the Federal Reserve does not want to admit that just yet. So that likely means that there is still going to be a downward trend in global economic temperature here coming up for at least the foreseeable time, at least for the next month, right? So if in December they can get into some different territory, then that'll be great. But as of this second, I don't personally see that. I see it looking more, more contrary to a bullish momentum here, at least in the near future. Now, elections could change that. All sorts of things are happening in November. Jobs reports, CPI, all that good stuff there could start changing the narrative just a little bit. But as of here today, November is not the time for the bull market just yet. So that's just some general higher level kind of economic output here from the FOMC meeting, in case most of you don't care about it, which most of you probably don't, because it is quite boring at certain times. So that being said, do we have any questions here popping up? All right, so I'll go into it there. PS Daddy, not asking for dates, but how long do we estimate from the white paper being released till migration actually happening? Honestly, man, I want to give an estimate, but I'm just going to refuse to do so right now, because simply put, I don't know. I'm not the one working on the developmental work. I'm not on the dev team. I simply cannot say it's going to be this time or this time. I've personally dealt with developers, even very high-level ones, that have a very hard time meeting their timelines, and it's always something, right? Somebody got sick, somebody's moving, something happened. Who knows what it might be? They don't answer for 2 days, et cetera, right? So I'm not saying that's what's happening here right now, but I cannot speak for somebody else's progress because I'm not the one actually working on the development side of that. So I just simply can't tell you right now because I personally don't know, and I do apologize for that.
All right, we just got a few questions in the AMA Questions Weekly channel, so I will start to read them. First will be from PS Daddy. Not asking for dates, but how long do we estimate from white paper being released and migration actually happening? White paper being realized and migration actually happening. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're good. That's one. I just answered that one there, so we can kind of push on to the next one.
Oh yeah, right. Next one is a request from Roland the Dude. Give a tokenomics teaser.
So as soon as Zenor wants those put out there, man, I will definitely put them out there. So right now we're trying to wait till we actually have a firm date, right? So if we try to market it a little bit too early, it loses steam, of course. But once we have a date, we can do this. We can start pushing out the information and kind of rebuilding that echo chamber here that we once had, where everyone can kind of ask about it and be answered about it, and it tends to move quite progressively from there. So without saying, I just simply can't put that out there just yet, but it is very substantially different than what we are dealing with now from the token and from the nodes. Both are very, very different.
All right, we have someone typing still. Let's wait for the question.
Let's see here. And if you guys do have questions, please simply request to speak live or post away in that AMA Questions Weekly channel. Try to keep it attuned to that AMA Questions channel so that we do not miss your question. But Darrell just asked a question as well.
Yeah, question from Darrell. It's my first time here. I'll be honest, I wasn't too active in the project, but my question is if our Polar tokens or nodes will be somehow included in this game project.
So yes, they're going to be definitely a piece of how the Polaris game is structured, a pretty substantial piece at that. So that is good news. So the nodes will have that kind of value where there is, it's pretty cool actually how it's all being played out, and even how the white paper reads. It's very like RPG kind of style, which is quite interesting. So there will be a pretty good impact on your active nodes involving the future games for sure.
All right, next question from one of our stress testers, WG. With everything being so different in the new world, are there opportunities to make money?
Yeah, of course, right? So I can't, and I'm not going to kind of tell people different strategies to take place here just because a lot of them are very difficult in a bear market. But there definitely are opportunities out there. And, the old saying is that wealth is generated in the bear market, right? So, there's all sorts of different blue chips out there. And if you are a longer term holder, an investor, where you're thinking 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line, then of course there's a lot of money to be made in any market. But that being said, if you're thinking like in the 2 to 4 week term, that's going to definitely be hit or miss. Some people try to take swings on random, meme coins that go live and ride hype. That's all very, very risky because they can go to zero in a heartbeat as well. But there are definitely different strategies out there to gain in DeFi these days, even if it is more difficult than it obviously was in the bull market, where you just drop, anything into anything and it would tend to 2 to 10 times pretty quickly. We are not in that situation anymore, of course, but maybe we will get back to there one day. And if you believe in the blue chips like the Bitcoins and the Ethereums and the BNBs of the world, then those might be a relatively safer play. And of course, USDC or other stable coins are the safest play. And then you can start trying to wait for it to actually show an upward trend and start dollar cost averaging back into the markets at that point.
Yeah, he just clarified his question and said, I meant with Polar specifically. Like, what do you think are the opportunities for Polar in the new world, in a new different world to make money?
WG, I don't understand if you mean with Polar as the protocol or with Polar as in those who have nodes. I don't really understand what you mean by that. So maybe you can clarify a little bit further.
With node holders and the protocol in general.
Okay, sorry there. With node holders and the protocol in general. So, like I kind of always talk about, it is a very, very different world than it was when, nodes were $3,000 or $4,000 a piece, right? So there's always going to be a different opportunity to gain in some aspect, right? But I can't sit here and promise you X, Y, and Z because that would be unethical, maybe, right? Because I can't predict the future. So a lot of it's going to be dependent on how you utilize the ecosystem. And what we are building towards is for it to be less of a node kind of gimmicky play and more of an actual business model. So in that sense, I would expect there to be different opportunities in the future for those who have been involved with the project as well as those who become involved in the project in the future. But exactly what those are going to be very, very dependent on just basically the general user's willingness or ability to interact with the new ecosystem in general. So the protocol, yes, but I feel like this is a very, very gray question. And, I could say yes and no because I honestly, I can't predict the future. So is there opportunities? Likely. But I can't sit here and say finite, this is what's going to happen in the future because there's a lot of different elements to that, right? So I guess that's how I'll answer it. Kind of gray worded, of course, but yeah, I can't necessarily tell people how to invest if that's fair.
Yeah, I agree. I think this was actually the last question so far. There is no one requesting to speak, if I'm not mistaken. Is there anyone who would like to ask a question or just say anything?
Yeah, that's okay. If it's a shorter AMA, that's perfectly fine too. We don't have a ton of information just yet for everybody, so definitely understandable. But we do appreciate you guys tuning in here. Hey, you guys know just as well as I do, I want more information to be able to put out to you guys. I want to be able to have the white paper up and actively going through all of it, which would be, that's really what I would definitely prefer to have going on, of course. But that's just not where we are currently. And with that, there's just not a ton of information to disseminate, of course. But that being said, there are always questions that'll pop up until we do it. This is kind of the downside of running weekly AMAs in a lull period, is there is, of course, an opportunity for not a whole lot of information to come out.
Yeah, actually, two new questions on AMA Questions Weekly channel. Another follow-up question from WG. So for new investors, what will be the value add of coming to Polar?
What will be the value add of coming to Polar? I'm sorry, WG. I'm having a very hard time understanding what you're actually asking.
I think what he means is what is interesting for new investors to invest in Polar specifically.
So I guess we're probably misunderstanding what you're saying, but there is going to be like I mentioned earlier, there's going to be a lot of gamifications, real world business models, different aspects of the nodes, the way the nodes interact with the ecosystem in general. So there is going to be a lot of different opportunities for any investor, whether you're new or you've already been here throughout this period of time, right? So a lot of those different things are going to be a part of the future, of course, and that's just likely how it's going to be moving forward. Now, exactly how that works is going to be defined by the white paper, and that's kind of where I'm like, hey, we got to get to that point. You have to be able to read and digest what is in that because, like I did mention, it is going to be a quite long document. But that being said, if the investor, which is the gamification investor that Polar is kind of catering towards in the future, is there, then there will be a lot of opportunity for them to engage with and ultimately do like a play to earn sort of system, but also legitimately like playing within the ecosystem that Polar is creating. And then you are having a kind of a different audience here than that old, not quite as manageable node system where it's an inherently inflationary mechanic solely, right? So that does change the game quite a bit. And some people will like that. Some people will try to move on and try to 10 times on something else. And that's perfectly fine too. We totally understand that some are not going to like the new vision and some are going to like the new vision, which is why we're going to put out that white paper and give people time to kind of digest it before they try to move over to the BSC side.
All right, next question from Ronan the Dude, which I don't fully understand, but maybe you do. How much can I get for a caged platypus?
That's a platypus. A
Do you know what that
platypus.
is?
That's a little mammal, so he's just messing
Platypus.
around there. I don't know, but you should probably let it
Oh,
free. Let it free to the world and let it do its platypus things. So,
okay, I'm sorry. I did not know what that means. Okay. Question from PS Daddy. Is the marketplace still up and running?
yes, it is. So right
Due
now
to
it is
the
still active. And if you go to there right now, let's see here, there are currently 4 nodes currently up there. One of which is 85,000 polar for Everest Emerald if you're interested in that. But then there's 3 others that are different bids, it looks like 1800, 2008, and then another one at 1500. So that marketplace is still live. There's only a few up there. Oh, let's see. So it could be a change. Auction ended on September. Okay, so there might not be anything listed on there right now. Um, I'm trying to remember how there was something that happened with like blacklisted wallets where they kind of had them stuck up there, and then also during our migration. So as far as I'm aware, it doesn't look like you can actually bid on these. Or they never got their bids, but I believe it's still functional, but I don't think that it'll actually transfer those specific nodes to you. We had people opening tickets about that when it happened, so that's probably just the way that it still is.
okay. Next question from I won't be able to pronounce that. I'm sorry. um, I have a Trust Wallet question. I haven't been able to hook to the dApp since the upgrade downgrade. Is there any work being done on this?
Yeah, so we've already talked with Enor about it quite a bit. I guess in order to reestablish that Trust Wallet connection, they'd have to redo this entire dApp, and I don't think they're going to do that, right? So we are aware that it is an issue with those who are unable to access the dApp because they are not using MetaMask. I know for a while there you were able to import your MetaMask, or excuse me, your Trust Wallet to MetaMask. But if I'm, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that no longer works. If I'm not mistaken, I think you can no longer do it there, but I'm not too sure if there's a difference between PC and mobile because I don't personally use Trust Wallet. But I do know that the new dApp is going to be fully functional with Trust Wallet, so you would be able to migrate nodes over as we still try to consider different options for those who have Trust Wallet in reference to their, pending Polar that they cannot claim, right? Because you cannot access the dApp. But that being said, if there's someone who uses Trust Wallet and you know that you were able to import it to another wallet that works, please let me know because I personally only use MetaMask and some other things that are not having issues within this specific question. So if you guys do know the answer to that, please let me know.
All right, follow-up question from PS Daddy regarding the marketplace question. Can we try and purchase them and see what happens? And could we lose our Polar?
I don't think it would actually transact through, but I don't think it would actually transact your Polar if you did do that. But if you do try to purchase one up there and it is more than just an approval because it will have an approval TXN. But if Polar actually leaves your wallet and you don't get the node, then you can just open up a ticket and we'll look into that for you. But at this point, if it isn't functional, the way it's designed was it'll approve the TX, it'll have an approval TXN, but it will not actually transfer Polar or the node either direction. So that's likely how it'll continue to work.
All right. Yeah, and maybe we should say in terms of transparency, there are people offering off-market trades. I saw them in different channels. Maybe it's important to say that we cannot ensure that these trades are actually legit, and we can't we can't really be responsible for anything that happens when you buy the nodes off market.
Yeah, if you guys decide to do like peer-to-peer trades, like Julian just said, we do not endorse that by any means. So you are taking that risk on your own. So, the marketplace is the only place to buy or sell nodes at any point. If you do, it's not illegal. It's not against the rules or anything, but you are putting that risk upon yourself. All right, cool. Let's make sure no one else is requesting. Oh, there we go. Emad. Emad 1414, you are now live. What's going on? Emad, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I can barely hear you. Emad, I'm having a very hard time with that connection.
About the discussion about the new Polar or the new nodes. My question is, I have some Polar token nodes, a Polar token. So, what do you suggest to do with it? Should I transfer it to BNB, or should I leave it the way it's probably? I have some. I have not, withdrawn or exchanged quite about 1 month now, and I've got a lot of nodes. But I just want your viewpoint. What's the best choice, to keep the node or to keep the token on my DM, or should I transfer it to BNB? Because the value, it has a very low value, 0.0003 or something.
Right. So I can't really give, financial advice here by any means. But that being said, it is totally your choice there, whether you choose to sell it on AVAX or otherwise utilize it to move it over to BNB. But I can say that once we move over to BSC, that we are no longer supporting this liquidity pool, right? So we're not going to pull the LP or anything like that, but we are no longer going to be supporting the LP on this side. So once we do move over, you'll still be able to sell those tokens as long as they're in your wallet on Trader Joe, for example. But it might not be the best idea if you do plan on migrating. A lot of people did utilize different platforms and transfer their Polar over to BNB on the Binance Smart Chain so that they can help with the migration cost at that point. So that's kind of what I'd recommend is your options. But of course, that is totally up to you what you choose to do.
Perfect. Thanks for the advice. Just to get to know what is the best choice. The second thing, now we have these. I'm asking the same question probably. Others have asked before. My question is, if I have, let's say, 50 nodes or 60 nodes, I want to transfer those nodes to the new D app. Is it possible to transfer it or migrate it, or it's just going to be there on the other D app, on the old one, if you make the new D app operating or starts working?
I'm sorry, man. I really could not understand. I can't really hear you. It's very muffled. So I honestly could not hear that question.
I'll try again. I probably have something like 50 or 60 nodes that is on the old D app. To migrate to the new one, how much will it cost? Let's say the highest one, that is Olympus, right? How much will it cost to migrate the node from the old one to the new D app? What's the estimated cost? How much BNB would it cost us to transfer?
Okay, so I don't fully know just yet, to be honest, right? So it's all dependent on how complex the contract is. It's how many nodes that there are. The level of node doesn't matter, whether it's an Olympus or a Fuji. That doesn't really matter as far as migration costs are concerned. But it's basically a transaction fee, right? So the more nodes that you have, if you have 10 nodes, your costs will be very low. If you have 2,000 nodes, your costs might not be so low. But what I can say is that the average, transactional cost of like BUSD, a stable coin on BSC, is between 3 and 7 cents. That does not mean that that's going to be the cost to migrate nodes over. Usually it is a bit more for a contract like this, but I don't think it's going to be substantially expensive per node. It's going to likely be, in the cents kind of range for each node as you migrate them over to the BSC side.
Okay, thank you very much. That was my question. And as you briefed before, if it's before June, I remember, if the node was created before June, it will maintain what it is. But if the node was created after June, then it will downgrade to one stage down, if I'm not mistaken.
So we didn't say one stage down. So there are going to be a variety of different things that come out for the nodes created after that June timeline, whether it's combining them or downgrading them. But it will be some sort of combination or downgrade method for sure. It's just not necessarily just one down.
Right. My last question is just brief because you're into crypto, you're dealing with economics. What do you see the future of crypto in the next, let's say, 5 years or 10 years? Do you think? Do you think the coins will exist, or is it only a short term? Because it's heavily been impacting Bitcoin and all the big coins, Ethereum and all that, based on the country's laws. So do you think in the future crypto market will expand, or you think it's just going to stay how it is from your viewpoint?
Yeah, so I think it's definitely going to be a thing in the future. You can already see large scale, top 4 of the S&P 500 companies. 2 of the top 4 have already created some sort of different deals involving cryptocurrency. So I think it's going to be a thing into the future, including many of the different, retirement investments like Fidelity and stuff like that are also creating Bitcoin ETFs, for example. So it is going to be something in the long term. What's the value of it in the long term? I guess we shall see. But I do think it's going to be around. It's going to stand the test of time, just like any other financial market will. And I think it has a great chance of being heavily expanded over time.
Thank you very much for just giving us some good information. I hope you have a wonderful day.
Hey, great questions, and thank you as well. Sorry, a lot of background noise there, but I think we got through it the best that we could. So definitely appreciate all your questions. Very much so. Appreciated. But that being said, it looks like that's everybody requesting to speak and asking questions in the AMA Questions Weekly channel, if I'm not mistaken. Make sure nobody's typing. So kind of the highlights here today is white paper is progressing along. This went over another rough draft yesterday, getting closer and closer to getting that final paper out there for everyone. And also the Polar Bear Battle Royale game is very much, though, progressing. We already have several testers already working on it. We will have a public tournament here coming very soon within the next, ideally, couple of weeks. So we'll have some good information on that over time. Pred will give out a lot of information on that. He's been the one primarily working on it, so much appreciated on that end. And that's kind of the latest and greatest here. I know it's been a little bit of a, not a whole ton of information to come out today, but that's okay as well. We definitely appreciate you guys joining in. Thank you, Julian, for joining in again here today and helping me out, of course, as we look forward to getting you guys more information. I think once we get that white paper out, it'll be a much more substantive AMA, which I definitely am looking forward to as well. I think many people will appreciate that. But until then, till next time, we will catch you guys in the chat. Thank you all for joining in on this Polar Weekly Community AMA. As always, Wednesday at 8 p.m. UTC. And we will catch you guys all again next week, same time, same place. Peace out, fam.